everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection with Kata Judah being the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our sacred feminine site. So what I'm here to do is to interview 100 men and hear all about their journey into the heart, their highs, their lows, tools, practices, insights, wisdom, knowledge. What have they got now that they can share with the other men walking this path? And of course, us women who are walking right there beside them. Today's guest is a man called Brian Piergrossi, and he is a life coach, a breathworker, a meditation teacher, and an author. So really looking forward to having a chat to Brian and hearing all about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, and we have Brian Piergrossi here. Happy to have you here, Brian. Whereabouts states are you from?
I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, United States of America. Very happy to be here.
Oh, so good. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about your journey into the heart. So let's start with the man you are inside today. How would you describe that man once you drop all your external labels?
Okay, how do I describe who I am? Well, there's a couple different levels, right? There's like the timeless essence of who we are, that it's unchanging. And that's where I am mindful to reside and to be anchored. And then there's the world within the time and space that continues to develop and to evolve. And I think there's four anchor points that I assess my life and those that I work with around. And that would, number one would be love. Number two would be peace or inner peace. Number three would be freedom. And again, it's like an inner freedom. And four is empowerment. And so I'm mindful to keep deepening in those four aspects with each day that progresses in this lifetime.
Oh, that's so good. Let's get into those four while we've got them. All right. Forefront. So just to expand on each, and I love how you made the differentiation between inner peace and what's going on in the external world,
right.
And it also for number three, what freedom, inner freedom. Can be very different from what we would perceive to be freedom outside. So can you please expand for predominantly the men watching from a male point of view, what those four things mean for you?
Yeah. Inner peace, you said it well. Like there can be varying degrees of chaos and drama outside of ourselves. But if we are mindful of the inner world, we can still maintain a sense of inner peace inside ourselves, which revolves primarily around quieting the mind, accessing a place of stillness inside ourselves. And when we were able to access that, then that permeates out through our interactions with the world, through our relationships, and we make a positive difference in bringing more of a sense of inner peace to the world, not by trying to force other people to do it, but by accessing that inside ourselves. Freedom is an interesting thing. Wow, I mean, that's something we could go down that rabbit hole for a while. But freedom, I would say, primarily is freedom from unconscious limiting belief systems. So being grounded in a place of infinite possibility, which isn't easy to do. We live in a world where the intention is to constantly condition us and tell us we're this and tell us we're that and label us in different ways, and then we start to do it to ourselves. It becomes internalized. And so to be mindful and to dig deep and to inquire, to live from that place of infinite possibility, that would be the ultimate freedom, which is greater than any kind of external freedom that would be temporary, that we could access.
Yeah. Can we just, because this is what's I think relevant the most in today's, with the past 3 years and with what a lot of people are going through. What does that look like for, let's say, a man who has this inner peace? He might be living in a city in America that's pretty chaotic at the moment. How can you give the example of how that would play out in a man living in an American city that there's a lot of chaos, but he has his inner peace inside?
It's the foundation is just being with what is, like, what is happening in the moment. There was actually someone that said something very so simple to me, but it was very life changing for me. And they said, "Whatever's happening, that's what's happening." I was like, "Oh, that's actually pretty profound." So whatever's happening, that's what's happening. So inside trying to resist it, it should be this way, it shouldn't be that way. All of this noise internally, it's not helpful. And so I think a certain level of maturity on this path of spiritual awakening, you recognize more and more that that's a misuse of energy. And so being with what is allows us to respond from a place of consciousness and creativity to the moment in a way that we can't if we're unconscious place of resistance to the moment. So there just starts to be this understanding and recognition and realization that things work out better when you can access a sense of inner peace and operate and make decisions from that place inside.
What do you say to men who are focused on changing the external world? And I understand it's a stage that many of us go through as we see, the political world, the geopolitical world playing out. And we think to order to change it, we have to go out there and protest or,
Right.
rally against the government. But at the same time, that's not creating inner peace. How do you explain, how can we change the world if we're in a place of inner peace and not out there changing it?
Yeah, I had a revelation about this. Gosh, my gosh, it was like 20 years ago now. The run up to the Iraq War. Um, I was in strong opposition to this war and was very concerned about what's happening. So they had a protest. They called it anti-war protest. Right off the bat, we're off to a bad start. Like instead of being for peace, you're against something instead of for something. So it was an anti-war protest. So I went to that, and there was thousands and thousands of people, and signs and all this stuff, and people were yelling things and shouting things and cursing at people and very very angry, and in a very kind of vile state of just really kind of torn up inside, or kind of divisive energy, in a very divisive energy. And so I just kind of had this moment of kind of looking around and observing the scene, and kind of realizing these people they're not emanating peace. So if they're not emanating peace, then we're not going to be creating peace. This is actually going to be creating more conflict, more division, more separation, and in a certain way, even more war. So the first thing is to realize that. And then I'm not opposed to people trying to make I think it's good actually to try to make a more positive world externally. But it's just that the realization, you make the connection that it starts within yourself, being the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah, great explanation. Thank you, Brian. All right, let's look at little Brian now. What was his major challenge growing up?
Major challenge growing up. That's a good question. I think when you're a child, there's a lot of fear, and I think again it goes back to we're conditioned that way. We're conditioned to be afraid in a variety of different ways. One is just survival. We're kind of conditioned by our parents and by our school, and so I felt a lot of fear kind of like all around me from all the different authority figures. And so that, I think that was my biggest challenge to move through and to inquire into and transcend.
It was interesting that you mentioned the authority figures around you. Was it all of them, or was it some in particular that really sort of pushed that fear onto you?
It seemed like the whole system was kind of based on that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people were like, you have to be afraid. That was happening all the time, but it was kind of in the field, it was kind of in them.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school growing up, and I think there was that that dogmatic system had certain fear-based things in it that were being taught. But yeah, I just felt like, also I kind of had the feeling of a lot of people around me, the adults, they didn't grow up, they didn't live their dreams. So they were living a life that was like compromised. And so then it kind of, what happens, and I'm sure we're all familiar to some degree, is then the adults go, well, you can't live your dreams either because we didn't. So it's not possible for you. So don't try, that's a fearful direction to go. If you try to just go for it and, you know, like for example, like any kind of artistic field that was like totally a no-no, you can't make money that way. You can't, all this kind of stuff. So all that kind of stuff was like there. That was conditioning for me to, like I said, to transcend and overcome.
Yeah. So how did you overcome that or deal with that as a little boy? Like you might not have at that time been able to label it because that's how
Mm-hmm.
the system you were born into.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you make any sense of the world at that point?
Mm-hmm. There was something in me, I can't really explain it, totally, but there was something in me that just never totally bought it, never totally was like, this doesn't feel right. Something didn't feel right in it. And so that was there, I feel like from the beginning. Um, and then there was kind of like I'm kind of jumping ahead now, but we can circle back. But basically there was like that sense of something doesn't feel right. And then there was kind of like this sense of kind of like rebellion, resistance. Um, I went through a phase, which is not that common, not that uncommon as a teenager. Went through a phase where I really kind of hated my parents and where I grew up, the small town I grew up in, and wanted to get out of there and get away. And, California was the cool place at that time. So I wanted to go to like California, which I did. Um, and so that was like the second phase of this kind of rebellion and resistance to the initial phase. And then there was like a third phase, which I'm very happy about, which was sort of coming to appreciate and reintegrate where I came from and overcome this sense of rebellion and resistance and realize that um, where I came from, including the challenges, made me who I am today. And so that was kind of like the full circle, almost like that movie, The Lion King, where you kind of go back, you make the full circle.
Yeah.
Not literally, like I don't live where I grew up, but I remember like there was a period in my adult life where I was spending more time there and kind of coming back and, appreciating those places and those people that I came from.
Yeah, fascinating how, as an adult, you were able to come to that realization that everything that challenges us on our life, including our childhood, is for us to become what I say the highest version of ourselves. Can you speak to men out there who maybe struggling to understand that piece of the puzzle and still maybe blaming their childhood, their parents, schooling, whatever it is? That can you speak to them, please, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's very common. I think it's very common across all of humanity that when I work with people, I was one of the first I encountered a lot of resistance to the way, the mother, the father, brothers, sisters. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think forgiveness is a word that's just thrown around, right? It's kind of a word that's, what does it mean? Why? What's the, but it is a really important part of this journey. And the forgiveness isn't primarily for the other person, it's primarily for yourself, right? And it primarily, forgiveness, think of it as like, I've been thinking of it as like a technology, right? That brings you those four things like we talked about earlier. Forgiveness brings you that sense of inner peace. It brings you that sense of freedom inside. It brings you that sense of love, and it brings you that sense of empowerment. So I've found that to be a really powerful gateway. And I think the other thing that brings you into forgiveness is just recognizing and realizing that the people that are in our lives were just doing their best. They were just trying their best, and they had a lot of pain, and they had a lot of things that they weren't aware of, they didn't understand at the time, didn't know at the time. And that allows us to feel compassion for our mother, for our father, for whoever else was around us. And kind of see them as human beings, right? See them as human beings, that they're human beings that are trying their best and making mistakes sometimes, and evolving along the way, just like we are.
Yeah, I think the piece people struggle with regarding forgiveness is that they have the notion that if they forgive someone, they're saying what you did is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, would you agree with that? And can you clarify that piece, please?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was just dealing with something today where there's um, a guy that I'm interacting with that's being very wishy-washy and says he's gonna do something and doesn't do it, and yes and no, and I just had this realization that, like, and now it's starting to affect other people in a negative way, averse people in the group that we're in. And so I just had this realization that actually I don't want to tolerate this behavior anymore, right? So that's interesting, because does that mean that I don't forgive him? I think there's a thing where you forgive the past, and it doesn't mean that you don't have what people would call boundaries moving forward in the future as well. So you can have both. So you don't want to be carrying, because you're just hurting yourself, right? You don't want to be carrying this thing from the past that's weighing you down, and that restricts your openness to life. And at the same time, you can also say, and if people want to interact with me, if they want to be my girlfriend, my boyfriend, if they want to be my friend, if they want to do business with me, I have certain standards that need to be honored in order to do that.
Yeah, great points there. All right, let's look at your adulthood. What would you say was your rock bottom moment, Brian?
Rock bottom moment, I think, was actually early in my adulthood when I was 20. I came down with chronic fatigue syndrome that lasted for quite a few years. And for the first 6 months, I was completely bedridden, but it went on for years. And yeah, that was a very difficult time. I was going to the university at the time. I had to stop going for a while, and had to live with my parents, and they were helping to take care of me. And so that was the rock bottom moment. But as so often with these rock bottom moments, that was also the catalyst for my spiritual awakening, and really inquiring more deeper into life, and who am I, and why am I here, and what is my purpose, and why is there suffering, and how do we transcend suffering. And so I really gave my life to that journey. That's really when the journey began. So again, something that was difficult, as the journey evolves, you look back and you have gratitude for that.
So, what was the turning point? What was that first spark of light that set you off on the spiritual path from? when you were in that rock bottom moment?
Well, yeah, the thing, it's suffering. Almost with every, there are some people I think that's not the case, but almost everyone, suffering is the catalyst for our spiritual journey. And so I really like to convey that message to people, because there's people right now that are in a lot of suffering, and it's it's an opportunity. When you're in that space, it's an opportunity to open up to a whole new level of realizing who you are and why you're here, and expressing yourself in the world that is available to you if you take the opportunity and you say yes to it. And the interesting thing about life too is that what I found is the suffering, if you don't say yes to it, the suffering just intensifies and intensifies. It's almost like, the way I think of it is, God kind of like taps you on the shoulder very gently. And if you get, no, I'm busy,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then you start getting slapped around harder and harder. It's like, okay, I need to pay attention. Kind
yeah,
of works like that.
yeah. So good. So, what tools or practices like did you start picking up that really made a difference?
Meditation, yoga, what I now call breath work, but at that time I just was like learning how to breathe. Like, it's amazing how we don't even breathe. That was a huge realization for me, was like working with the breath. Um, what we call now mindfulness practices, practices to be in the moment. And yeah, I became more conscious of my diet, so nutrition, just a real holistic approach. It was really just almost like creating a new me, creating a new, like, almost like, kind of like, I think there's, especially if you're on this journey, there can be like kind of chapters in your life where it's almost like the old you, not totally, because there's something that remains, but the old you sort of dies, and then there's a new you that is birthed out of that. It was really, recreating a new me.
Yeah, I love that. Let's get deep into the meditation part because if I'm correct, you're a meditation teacher. Now, I'd like to hear about your journey into meditation, how it evolved for you. And then after that, I'd like you to speak to men about meditation, those that struggle with meditation, and to give them some tips and tools that they can, incorporate a meditation practice into their lives.
Yeah, so that was a real journey. I mean, at first, it's like, what is meditation? How do I do it? How do I not do it? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? What's the technique? What's the best technique? What techniques better than other techniques? It's kind of like you're approaching it the same way you'd approach, like, buying a car, something like this. There's a very materialistic way that the mind is still working, but that can be that's the starting point. So that's okay. So yeah, so trying different things, learning what it is. The other thing I think that's really big is the idea of, I'm going to do this and it's going to get me to some better place. Like, it's a means to an end, essentially. So this brings in all this expectation, you know, and that's actually not helpful. So you start to learn that as well. It's all of these, the spiritual, the path of spiritual awakening is very paradoxical, all the way through. It's very paradoxical. So it's only when you're letting go of trying to get somewhere else that something really powerful happens that, takes you, at least it seems like it's taking you somewhere else, it's taking you somewhere greater, let's say, or somewhere deeper or something. There's a profound, you don't get the profound spiritual experiences by your ego trying to, make you get there. But this is all learned by spending a lot of time just sitting and being with yourself. So I think at the roots, at the core, meditation is taking quiet time to be with yourself. And as you evolve with it, the kind of strategies and techniques aren't, they're not, it's fine to have them, but it's not the point. It's not where it's at. And really it's about just being present with yourself, and being in a place of becoming intimate with yourself. moment by moment.
So, what are some tips for absolute beginners? To like, how do you lead someone into meditation?
Hmm. I think the breath is especially for a beginner, is a really key gateway, because the breath is in the moment. The breath is here now. It's happening now. It's, as long as you're alive, it's not happening. And to be aware of the breath, and to really track that your breath slows down and deepens, and that you're breathing fully into the bottom of your stomach and into your chest, feeling your stomach expand, your chest expand, the inhalation, and releasing fully in the exhalation. That that itself is a game changer for one's life, when you really tune into your breath and realize the power of your breath, and start to hone into how to breathe. And through meditation, you're basically watching your breath, right? Or that's one way of meditating. So you watch your breath, and then you're able to, because you're paying attention, you're being attentive to your breath, you're able to be more focused in the moment. You're able to more attune to breathing in a more natural, free way.
Yeah. Is the goal of meditation to empty your mind of thoughts?
That is a good question. So back to what I said earlier, I would say, someone who's new, they're gonna be like, "What?" But I would say there is no goal,
Ah,
right? There is no goal except to be in the moment.
mm,
And with being in the moment, and meditating consistently, and have the intention to be present to what is, be present to the here and now, and to be with what is, you will find that your mind quiets.
mm. Now, an interesting question. I know when you were talking of your childhood, you said maybe things like, the creative arts were suppressed somewhat.
Yeah.
When you started meditating, did that expand your creativity?
I think that tapping into the spiritual journey definitely, yeah, definitely accelerated the creativity, and meditation was a part of that. One of the phrases, I haven't heard anyone else use this phrase, but I think it's a great phrase, um, for God or source. I call it the universal creative intelligence.
Mm.
And it is a creative intelligence that is universal, that is in all places at all times. And so when you start to tap into that and access that, then you become one with this creative intelligence. That's the whole intention for me. You become one with this creative intelligence, and then this creative intelligence moves through you. So the intention would be that you become a clear channel or a clear vehicle for this creative intelligence to move through you moment by moment, with the decisions you make, with the thoughts you think, with the words that you say, with um, yeah, with your actions, in each moment, that you're a clear channel and vehicle for this universal creative intelligence.
Yeah, I love that. And I asked this question because it was only once I started meditating daily for 4 months that my writing, poetry, just started coming
Yeah,
through. But
yeah.
I'm interested in something else too. Is intense meditation, say daily meditation, something that is a lifelong practice, or is it something that you get so good at that you become an embodiment of that frequency?
For me, it's to the point where I think when people first start meditating, they have to, oh God, it's so painful. And I see that people I work with that first start meditating, it's very torturous, you know. But for me, it's actually very enjoyable. So, and it's very grounding. It's very rejuvenative. Um, so, so yeah, I do it, I guess, like in the same way I would like go for a walk in the woods or something, because I enjoy it, and I find it's valuable for my body and my mind and my heart. And so I don't think about I don't think of it like I need to do it or not need to do it. It's just like, oh, this is something that feels good to do.
Yeah, that creative, that divine field that you spoke about earlier,
Mhm.
is that something that now you can tap into straight away without sitting down and meditating because you've done some
Yeah, I think it's
meditation?
being conscious and present to ask. to inquire and to listen. So that's how I would define prayer. Like, to me, meditation is receptive. It's sort of a listening. It's just being quiet. And then prayer, the way I define it, is kind of more conversational. Like, what should I do right now? Where should I go? Who should I, this kind of a thing. And then listening for the answer.
So when you're in that prayer mode and you're having this conversation, who are you
Mm-hmm.
conversing with?
God. Also, we could call it different words, right? Like source, great spirit, etc. And then also this term, what I said, the universal creative intelligence. Like, I think that really hits it well. But um, it's something that can't be comprehended by the mind. Like, there's no mental image. You can't conceptualize it with your mind. It transcends. It includes all things.
Now we hear the term higher self thrown around quite a bit.
Mhm.
Where does the higher self come into it?
I mean, people might use that term too. Like, I'm not someone that gets too caught up in the words people use for what we're because, like, whatever word we're going to use isn't totally accurate, you know. So that might be another phrase people use, and there's so many other ones that people use too. But again, it's like we're pointing at something that really can't be comprehended or conceptualized by the mind, and so we will use a word that um, is transcend that points toward the transcendent and
Yeah,
the infinite.
I love this. And I like to, throw out these phrases just because, everyone's got different ideas and
Mm-hmm.
people hear it and, wonder how that piece of the puzzle fits in. But I love that. And it's so true. Once you go to the mind and you start, wanting to label everything, it's no longer in divine flow. All right, let's look at yoga. Another tool that just helped me so much on my practice, and I love hearing about it from men. What was your journey into yoga?
I think hatha yoga, is really great for bringing the embody. It's kind of like, there's several different things like that. I like everything that I've explored in this realm. I think is really valuable, where it's like kind of like mindful embodiment, meditative embodiment. So to me, yoga is that, where you're being very present. The way I learned yoga from my first teacher, the first thing she talked about was the breath. Be mindful of your breath. Be attentive to your breath. Breathe into each posture. Breathe into each body part, um, and be very conscious of your body. How does it feel? What's happening in your body? Does it hurt? Does it feel good? Are you tight? Are you loose? What's going on? So all of this brings you into the moment, and in the moments where it's happening. So um, I think it's a great practice to deepen in one's embodiment and to deeper into one's connection to the mind and the body, and to connect to being more present in the moment, um, and the interaction between the body and the mind and the heart in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, because obviously when we're in the moment, we're not worrying about the past, what happened yesterday,
Correct.
or the bills
Yeah.
that need to be paid tomorrow. And so, yeah, I love that. And you mentioned breath work, and you've mentioned breath in both meditation and yoga. But is there anything else around breath work that you want to bring into this conversation that is relevant?
That's the primary modality that my wife and I are using now, and just find it to be super powerful. Just a lot of major chat. I mean, someone just told us we did a breath work was it this past weekend? Our last breath work that we did, someone just told us that they stopped drinking alcohol immediately after. They were, and by their definition, an alcoholic, and stopped drinking alcohol immediately after the breath work, and had some other major powerful shifts as well. But a lot of different stories like that. It's like kind of people dropping habits like that, or people have different physical healings that happen. And so someone might say, well, why? Why is that happening? Um, you get into like a very deep state of relaxation, a very deep state of um, transcendence, or transcending the mind, and you're connecting to this primordial essence, like God, higher self, this thing that we're talking about, which is not really a thing. You connect to it, and that's where restoration happens. That's where you're created anew in that place. And it's like that the person's not doing it, I'm not doing it. It's something that's happening beyond us. Whenever there's a healer and the healed, the healer isn't making the person get healed. There's a relationship of some kind of deep level of trust there that's allowing this other thing to come into the space and do the work that's naturally available to be done.
Yeah, and I love how, you keep bringing this back to the moment of now, because for me, that
Mm-hmm.
is the portal of healing. If you say,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
if you're in any other place other than now, you're in your mind, right? You're in the past
Mm-hmm.
or the future. But to be, and as you said, it's this focusing on the breath and the body and the embodiment of what's going on now, that is with our senses, that brings us into this beautiful healing point of now. Have you got any more to say around this?
I fully agree. You're speaking my language. I wrote a book called The Wow of the Now, Awakening to the Big Glow Within. So yes, I totally agree. The now is the key to all of this. And if you can access the now, which you know it is the now is now, so it's pretty easy to access it.
Yeah.
It's available. The now is available to everyone, regardless of what you look like or where you're from or what your education level is. The now is available to everyone. And when you start to realize that everything's happening right now, there's nothing that happens that's not right now. It's like, okay, well, that means now is pretty important. Then I better pay attention. I better pay attention to right now. And so then you start the journey, of journeying deeper and deeper into the now, and that's where all the magic and the miracles happen.
What are your thoughts around the concept that time is an illusion?
Yeah, so that's I think the word illusion is, from what I've noticed, is a controversial word for people. And I guess it's controversial because it can kind of create this sort of spiritual bypassing sort of a thing. Is that a word that your listeners are familiar with, a phrase? Spiritual bypassing, meaning like, I'm so spiritual and time doesn't exist. So, I'm not going to go to work today or take a shower or, that, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a responsible human being and like take care of, my kids or, my spouse or, because it's all an illusion.
Right.
So I think there's some objection to the term for that reason. But if I had to say, yes or no, I would say yes, it's an illusion. And it's an illusion because time isn't really real. Like that's the starting point that we just talked about, like recognizing that this is the now, like this now is all there is. And so we create the future by thinking about it, and we create the past by thinking about it also. And then the past and the future can actually look different if we think about it differently, right? So we ground more deeply in the now, and we recognize that linear time isn't really real. It's a construct of the mind. And also, through being present, we are more responsible. That's my experience. We become more responsible. We become more responsive and more responsible. And we are more caring and conscientious through being present and now. So it doesn't end up being something that you are irresponsible.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love what you said. Now, let me see if I remember it rightly. You said you can change the past or the present by changing your perception of it. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain this? And if you've got any examples, this is great.
This is great, and I think the one that's tricky for people is, or the one that's surprising for people is the past. Well, the past is a set thing, right? The future I can get, but the past. But I gave a little example earlier of like my parents. I had a story about them before, and that was if you would have said, "What's your past? What's your past?" Well, this is my past. This is how it is. This is how my parents are. This is all these things about them that aren't true. They're just a story that I had. And so as I evolved, awakening my consciousness further, the story changed, which also isn't true. but it's a different story than before. So you start to recognize that, yeah, I have what is history? His story, right? So it's like there's the story of the past that we have, and we're just telling stories. And as we mature, as we evolve, as we awaken, as we grow, the story can change, and it does change. And the story of the past affects the story of the future too. So they're kind of intertwined. This is what people sometimes call a timeline. You're in a timeline of the future and the past, and you just start to realize that this idea of the future is a story that we're creating, and this idea of the past is a story we're creating, and it can be recreated in a different way.
Yeah. And I think, also you spoke about the system earlier. The system very much functions to keep us chasing goals in the future or, focusing on the past, anything but the power of this beautiful present creative moment. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, what I find is that the biggest thing to me is I find that it keeps us afraid. I find this with the mainstream media. I find this with mainstream religion. I find this with the corporate, the kind of multi-corporate and their commercials and their ads and everything. It's kind of this, yeah, it's like it's all very fear-based, and there's just no need to be afraid. I mean, there is the kind of like the fear of the moment, if like some kind of wild animals attacking you or something, in the moment, but you don't want to carry that, it's like, so, but they want to keep us in kind of a psychological fear, in a kind of perpetual state of psychological fear. And it's not true. There's no reason to be afraid in that way.
Mm. So let's return to your story about your chronic fatigue syndrome. What happened then? You started coming into these practices of meditation, yoga, breath work. How did that play out then?
I was also reading a lot. The internet wasn't so evolved yet. So I was like reading a lot of books from the library, whenever I could get my hands on, and learning so much, just so much was opening to me about how the mind works, about who I really am, the spiritual essence of who I really am. And it was a journey too. It was kind of subtle shifts, a few maybe bigger shifts, but generally it was pretty gradual. And yeah, just whoever I could access that I could like listen to, if someone I thought was wise, or had some kind of answer. I used to call it enlightenment, so I was looking for enlightenment. So whoever would have some answer about enlightenment, I would just listen to them talk and ask questions, and really felt like like kind of like a sponge at that time. And so it was, as much as it was like I always feel like on a physical level, it was a very difficult time. And then on an internal level, on a spiritual level, it was an exciting time.
Mm. Was that in the 90s? There were so many classic sort of, books coming out in that decade. I know I was the same as you, a sponge, but because
It
you
was the 90s,
the
yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
What were some of the
Yeah.
books that had the most profound effect on you, or authors?
Let's see. I'll go in chronological order. So first there was a book. I don't remember this book, the name of this book, but the first kind of big movement for me was the body mind connection.
Mm.
So I didn't even realize that the body and mind were connected, and so that was a real realization for me, because I was feeling sick, and I was like, oh, the way I'm thinking and the thoughts and my emotions and this is all affecting, my physical state. And so that was a big opening to a whole kind of holistic way of seeing the world.
Was it
And
Louise
that
Hay? You can heal your life.
she wasn't someone, no, I don't think I still haven't read. I mean, I know the book, but I
Yeah.
don't think I read it. That wasn't one of the books I read. I mean, it was people that, at that time, it was sort of like, yeah, you're like kind of like Wayne Dyers and Deepak Chopra. They were the kind of the popular people, and that was what I had access to. I'll give credit to Tony Robbins. He had this book, Awaken to the Giant Within.
Mhm.
And, he wasn't necessarily, he was using different terminology. It wasn't necessarily spiritual, but he was pointing at, you can make a change by changing the way you look at the world and the way you see the world and the way you perceive the world, which I didn't know. That was new to me. So that was powerful. And there was a lot of kind of like time, kind of, not everybody, there was teachers that were kind of from, ancient times too, that I got a lot of wisdom from. Wasn't all current people. Eckhart Tolle was a big inspiration. The Power of Now and the New Earth. It was kind of like a confirmation. It was like reading that book and like someone being able to articulate very clearly what I was realizing in myself. Like, oh, he's saying the thing that's like, that's happening for me. And that's what I'm experiencing, the way I'm seeing things. So he was really valuable in that way. Um, yeah, and there was a lot of others too, but those are a few. Are you familiar with Ken Wilber?
No.
His books too. They were more intellectual, but he would talk about the stages of consciousness. Um, yeah, so there was quite a few people though. A long journey of people I have to be grateful for.
Oh, it's amazing. The
Yeah.
book that started what you said about, the changing your perception on thoughts. For me, that was Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Zones. Now, I read
Hmm.
that in the 90s and I was blown away. It would have been early 90s. Oh my God, you can actually control your thoughts. And that
Yeah.
changed everything. And that was it. Boom. I couldn't stop reading enough of all the sort of spiritual and self-healing books from then on. Yeah, so good. So
You're
what,
right though. That was a powerful time, that period in that 90s. Yeah.
yeah, before the internet, we sat down
Hmm.
and read books. So how did what was happening to you physically with your chronic condition?
Um, very weak, very tired. Um, I would have intense headaches particularly in the beginning, and I had a rash as well that would come and go. But and my head was very cloudy as well. I'd say the primary things were the fatigue and the cloudy head.
And did this heal? How did this end up healing?
So I started off, going to the medical establishment and doctors, and they didn't have any answers for what was happening for me, but they still wanted to prescribe drugs and so forth. And so I just kind of came to the realization that they didn't have any answers for me, and I had to kind of find out for myself. And so that started me on the journey of holistic health and holistic healing. And that was I think this is important people understand too. That journey is generally a slower journey, but it's a more, um, what's the word, like, something changes. It's I guess permanent, right? It's a real actual change,
Yes,
because you're changing your lifestyle,
right.
and you're changing your life, and you're changing the way you think, as we already talked about. You're changing your emotion, you're changing your heart, your emotional state, you're changing your spiritual understanding of who you are. So it's like all these things you're changing, and they're bringing you into balance. They're bringing you into health. They're bringing you into a connection to the life force that resides inside all things. And so that was the journey for me, where initially um, I was out of balance, out of alignment, you know, and so that created a sense of dis-ease, not being at ease.
Yes. Do you think, Brian, do you think it's a matter of when we start incorporating these embodiment practices and coming more into the now and just becoming more aware of our thoughts, that we rise in frequency and vibration, and then we no longer align with physical ailments or outside conditions that align with our higher frequency? So we let go of all that, dis-ease and sickness.
Yeah, I think yes, like we're raising our vibration, we're coming into a higher state of consciousness, and I think it's still possible to get sick when you're in a higher state of vibration, in your higher state of consciousness. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is people call it different things, but kind of like a spiritual upgrade. So it's like you're there's something because we're continuing to evolve. So there's something new to integrate. And so you kind of something new comes in, but you're not used to it yet. So you have to integrate it. And so you can feel like you're out of balance because you are out of balance because you haven't found the new higher balance, the new higher order integration. So that's one thing. And then sometimes there's still kind of a thing where people really do want to make a difference. They really do want to make an impact. And I could say, for myself, like there's been times in the past where I'm taking on too much. And then the body's like, slow down. You need to just chill for a few days and we're going to make sure of that for you. So, but you do become able to listen better and respond more quickly and not be in a state of resistance. So you can find the balance generally much quicker than when you're not as aware and not as conscious of your body and your mind and your emotional state.
You hear the first whisper, right? Instead of waiting for
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
truck to run you
yeah,
over. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
um, I'm interested in now because you said you started off in religion and obviously spiritual now. For you, how do you describe the difference?
Oh, okay. Well, religion is kind of like these are the rules, these are the laws. Follow them. If you follow them, you're a good person. If you don't follow them, you're a bad person. If you follow them, depending on what your religion is, but let's just say like, you know, let's just say kind of traditional organized institution of Christianity. If you follow them, or Judaism or Islam, if you follow them, you'll go to hell. Sorry, if you follow them, you go to heaven. If you don't follow them, you go to hell. Right. So that's kind of that. And then what I have awakened to, people would call it more the mystical way. I actually was thinking of this phrase yesterday, which we should go into because I like the phrase mystical scientist. Um, so basically, the mystical path is you're in the now, you're fully available, you're fully open to the voice of God, to God's will, to source, to the universal creative intelligence, and you respond in the moment to what is the right thing to do that's of the highest benefit for all beings in the moment to the best that you can. And if you don't do it, if you miss the mark, um, then you learn from that and you get better and better at it.
Yeah. Now, I've heard it said, especially maybe in America, that the
Mm-hmm.
church says things like meditation and yoga are evil and allow, a portal for the devil to come in or something around that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak about that, please?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I've had a very interesting journey recently because I've had myself and some friends of mine, very close friends of mine, have had this unexpected, profound connection with Christ, direct connection, and we're like, whoa, what's happening? What is this? Um, And so exploring it has kind of had me rub shoulders with some people that I haven't rubbed shoulders with before. And that includes some people who consider themselves Christians that say some things you just said, like, this is the only way, and these other things are demonic or whatever. I don't see it that way. I see it that there's there's a path. I do think some things are better than other things. I do think that. I don't think everything is equal, but I think that everything, when you're on a path of a spiritual journey, everything is leading you in the right direction. So there's no reason to denigrate somebody else's path. If something's working for them, then let them keep doing it. If it's not working for them, they'll do something different. And I have a lot of humility. I don't, even working with people, even like coaching people, I let them tell me, for the most part, what's working for them and what's not working for them. I don't tell them this is what works for you and what doesn't. Like, I don't know until they share with me what's happening for them and what's working, and so, because we're all so unique. So I think a big part of this path is humility. I think a lot of times people on this path will sort of laugh and say like, well, I don't know anything, which is true. We don't know anything. But we do know to be available to the moment. In the moment, allow the truth of the moment to guide us and direct us. That comes from inside ourselves. And that's the intention, is to really be available and to be a clear channel for this light, to shine through us, and this intelligence to shine through us moment by moment, and just trust other people's paths. The last thing I'll say on that is, like, it's not really our business what other people are doing. Like if you're really dedicated to this, it's like a full-time job, right? To be really dedicated to this path, you don't have time to be worried about, oh, what are they doing? What are they not? It's kind of like you got to take care of your own field, And so it's what other people are doing that's for them to find their way with, and it's not for us to judge. So long story short, I don't agree with that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought it's because, the church wants people to connect with God through them, whereas meditation or yoga allows us direct connection, so they aren't able to come in with their control or fear programming.
I think a lot of this stuff is money. I mean, if we're honest, like, churches, they're a business, they want to make money, they want to make more money. And a lot of this stuff could be like, sounds a little harsh, but I think it's accurate. It's really like a cult. It's like they try to keep you in it, and don't look that way, don't look over there, don't get curious about that, don't get curious about that. This is the only way. Those people are really bad. Don't talk to those people. Don't talk to those people. I think when people are acting that way, that's a good sign that they're not confident in the truth of what they're sharing. Because if you're confident in the truth of what you're sharing, you say, oh, go talk to anybody, try anything. If you're confident your way's the best, you're not going to be concerned about what people are trying or talking to or what books they're reading. So
yeah, good points. Yeah. Brian, we've got about half an hour left, and I like to open up the conversation so each man can bring in, his gifts and knowledge and wisdom. So what would you like to talk about in your episode of Heart Warriors that you feel is important around men?
I think an interesting subject, because it's for men, I think an interesting subject would be we could call conscious awakened masculinity.
Love it. How do you define that when you're in your mind?
I think that when people think about it's an interesting conversation. I've had this conversation with a lot of women and men as well. When we think of like a spiritual man, we tend to think, I think most people tend to think of feminine characteristics of the man, and feminine characteristics are good. And I think we can also integrate masculine characteristics and be a spiritual conscious man. And I think not as many men have done that yet. That's kind of like the cutting edge of where we're going. And I think from the women that I've talked to, they want that. They want to see that from men. And I think there's men that want that in themselves. And so it's an important topic.
Yeah, I've always seen it as you know, the general flow for us all, and same with the feminine, but the opposite is like men maybe start off in unhealthy masculinity because they're so in their
Mm-hmm,
mind, and then they
mm-hmm,
find the heart maybe through yoga,
mm-hmm,
breath work,
mm-hmm,
meditation, and they come into this more spiritual side and start embracing more feminine qualities. But now
mm-hmm.
it's the path then to integrate the both, right? The heart and the mind, the masculine and the feminine, strength and flexibility. So, yeah, let's speak about that. Do you want to share your own journey of awareness first and in understanding how that played out for you?
Yeah, I think you said it really well. That's exactly how I see it too. And that's exactly, I would say, my journey is kind of three stages. First stage, kind of like meathead masculinity, that's the phrase that comes to my mind. Um, and then opening up on this like spiritual path. And I think when you open up on the spiritual path, I think initially you're in a receptive energy. You're in a receptive energy. And so the receptive is the feminine. And so you're connecting more from a feminine place. And then there's the third stage, which is the integration of the masculine, kind of like a higher conscious masculine into this awakened spiritual consciousness.
And how does a man do that? If a man's sort of in that spiritual side, the more feminine side, and great, you know, I'm not knocking it. It is
Mm-mm,
part of the journey, and some men choose to stay there. But what does this integrated, balanced with masculine, feminine, mind, and
mm-hmm,
the heart? What does this
mm-hmm,
man look like? What does he do?
mm-hmm. I drew some inspiration from David Data around this subject. He's an author, and he would, I think the way he phrased it, I like, is just like basically find your essence. You know, a lot of people are feminine essence, so find your essence. Find your authentic self. And then most men are some varying degree of masculine essence. So find your authentic essence. And I think that was my journey of like, you know, okay, I started, I'm navigating through these different things, but what's like the true me? Who am I really? Like, what's my authentic essence? And discovering that and kind of building the confidence to live from that. And so I think that's one thing. And then, thinking about it now, I think the relationships that we have help us to access that place more as well. So that's an important point, because when people talk, and even if you think about the conversation that we're having, like mostly everything I've said has been like a solitary thing, meditation and breathing practice and reading books, but really so much of my spiritual um, evolution has also come through relating with other people and learning, through the relationships. And so I think that's a big component as well.
What have relationships taught you the most? What are the biggest sort of lessons?
I think, like, this is going to sound really simple, but I think it's pretty deep actually. I think relating with a woman teaches you how to be a man,
Mm.
right? So like that relationship is going to teach you more than if you're just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to meditate and be this kind of hermit life kind of a thing. That can be good for certain periods of time, but I think that our creator did put us all here for a reason. Like, we're here to interact with each other and really and learn and grow from relationships. And there is something special in a man's journey of awakening that can come through deep relating with a woman and deep intimacy with a woman, especially I'd say most especially if that's a shared commitment together. So if it's like, hey, we're coming together to learn and grow and evolve and awaken in our conscience together, then that's a really beautiful, powerful container that you create together.
Yeah. What do you say to men who would love to have a partner, but it's just not happening for them?
Let me think about that one. I think that there's an idea that, you know, there's some external factor. Like, men can get, women too, but we're talking about men, right? So men can get bitter about women and the state of women and how women are and all the things that are wrong with them. And that's not gonna accomplish anything. That's not the right direction to go. So if you're having a consistent um, inability to form a sustainable interrelationship and you want to have that, then it's important to look within and look at what can I do differently? How can I shift myself? Because I can't change other people, right? I can only change myself. So how do I change myself? Where can I up level my life that I can be a better partner for someone?
Yeah. Any specific tips, tools?
Yeah. So I think that one thing, it comes back to what comes up for me too, is it comes back to fear. I think that there's a lot of fear. It's like what I've seen is what people fear the most is also what they long for the most, which is intimacy. People really fear intimacy. Men really fear intimacy, but they also long for it and they also want it deep down inside. And so, but it requires being vulnerable, and being vulnerable requires courage and being able to embrace the unknown. Because if you're vulnerable, you don't know if someone's still going to like you or not like you, accept you or not accept you. So then people kind of, well, then I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to open myself up because I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to be hurt, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't take that chance, you'll never open up to the possibility of that kind of intimacy with someone else. And that requires courage. So, so I think that's what it comes down to, is like just the courage and the commitment. Commitment's another thing, because we're in a world now that is kind of like fast food consumerist kind of, culture where it's like, oh, I'm having a hard time here. Let me try something else. Let me try something else, And so, but to deepen an intimacy requires commitment, which means you're going to be challenged. There's not every day is going to be a honeymoon. You're going to, especially, I think there's kind of a phase where generally it's like, maybe it's the first few months or few weeks or whatever it is, where you're in this kind of, all the hormones are going and you're in this kind of love state, and but you haven't really gotten to see the real humanity in each other. You haven't really gotten to see, you still have an image of each other, you know yeah. And so inevitably that image is broken, and then it's like you're kind of this kind of pivot point of like, are you going to commit to go deeper into a real deeper, more true, genuine state of love, or you're going to run away, essentially. you know and I think that commitment, when you commit to going deeper, there's something really, um, something fulfilling and something really meaningful that's there for you. But it does require that commitment, the ability to kind of face adversity in a relationship, and and always looking how you can evolve and grow in yourself, and learn to be a better man.
Great points. Thank you. What there's a lot of women watch this show. What would you say that women don't understand about men?
I feel like, I mean, the funny thing is, I feel like men are actually very simple, and women women tend to think they're more complicated than they are. But generally, men will say what they mean and mean what they say. They're pretty direct. They don't say a lot. They don't have a lot to say. And these aren't bad things. These are, they're women have their gifts, men have their gifts, women have their qualities, men have their qualities. Um, so yeah, so I think that's one of the things that I've noticed. Let's see if there's anything else about men. I think I don't know if maybe women knows, maybe they don't, but sometimes they might forget that for a man to feel fulfilled and to feel a real sense of well-being, it's very important for him to be living his purpose. And that can be like a challenge, I think, sometimes, because when a man is, if you're in a relationship with a man and he's living his purpose, it can kind of feel sometimes like he's taking his attention away from you. But you just have to navigate that balance, because if he's living his purpose, he's going to feel a sense of well-being and fulfillment and love, and and that love will spill over into the relationship. Where if he's not living on purpose, then um, yeah, all kinds of things like depression and feeling lethargic and feeling lost and disoriented, and then it can even devolve into substance abuse and things like that can happen. So you don't want that one. You want the first one.
Yeah, this is great. It's good that you brought up purpose, and I love how you brought up the dynamic of a man living his purpose while in a relationship, because I've
Mm-hmm.
always thought that for this integrated masculine, his purpose needs to be his priority. And I love how you said it's the off spill of the fulfillment from him living his purpose that he then brings to the relationship. Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah,
love how you explain that.
yeah, yeah. I think when my wife and I first got together, it was a little bit of a challenge, um, because, like I said, like there can be this sense of like, you know, is enough attention being given to the relationship, and it is a balance that you navigate. You don't want to give everything to your purpose, and have no, obviously you want to have some space for the relationship, a good amount of space for the relationship. But if you have a man that's giving all of his space to the relationship, and it has no purpose, that in my experience it doesn't work out well. So it may seem like it's a good thing for a few days or a week or something, but over the long haul, just support him in his purpose, and honor that and be appreciative of that, and then being mindful of making that space as well to be fully present together and making space for each other within that dynamic.
Yeah, would it be a matter of, if a man hadn't found his purpose yet, would he be, and was in a relationship, would he be trying to get his happiness solely from the relationship, because he wasn't getting it from living his purpose outside of the relationship, and obviously the fallout from that.
Yeah, what's interesting? I think what can happen is, because there's different kinds of love. Like we have there's all sorts of different love relationships. So there's the romantic love between an adult man and an adult woman. Um, and what I've found is, if a man doesn't have his purpose, doesn't have any purpose, and he's just sort of attaching himself to the woman, um, she almost feels like it's sort of like a mother. She's the mother and he's like a boy.
Yes.
And so she still loves him, but it's not the romantic energy, the sexual energy, the magnetism isn't there in that way.
Yeah, because I mean, really, when a man's living his purpose, the woman is in so much reverence and admiration and respect that he's out there fulfilled, living his purpose, doing good in service to the world. That, because living your divine purpose, I believe, is in service to others. It's not just based on, how much money can I earn, and, how much can I accumulate. And, for a woman to see that in a man, it just brings on so much admiration and reverence. So, it's a whole totally different dynamic to a man that doesn't have that. and what's she admiring then in him, just what he's bringing to the relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that that's very important for men to understand. Men, I think they approach how to attract women, especially young men. I'm connected to some young men because my son he's young, so I'm connected to people his age group. He's in college, and yeah, they have a lot of wrong ideas of what will attract women or what will make them be attracted to them, um, and what you just said is, I think that's the highest form of attraction. Really having that strong sense of purpose and clear sense of purpose, and a divine purpose that is of the highest benefit to highest benefit and service to the world.
Yeah. Which brings us back to the moment of now, is when this portal opens and the divine works through us, men and women. So, yeah. How old's your son?
21.
I have a 21-year-old too. What's the main issue our young men are struggling with at the moment?
There's a lot. I think they're having a hard time. And I see that with my son and his friends, but I also just tuning into different things that I'm hearing about statistics and so forth. Um, I think, well, first off, it seems like it's harder for them to have relationships. There's not as many relationships happening, and there's a lot of like addiction to the phone, to the screen, to technology, to video games, all of this kind of stuff. And it's almost like it kind of sort of like we were saying earlier. So I think like that becomes a safer place, where being vulnerable with a woman is scary, or a young girl, a young lady is scary, where the screen is kind of safer, but not nearly as fulfilling, of course. So I think they're kind of realizing that this isn't a fulfilling life, but they don't have the I guess experience yet, or they haven't ventured out in that way yet, because they're so. But I think when conscious of my son, there's kind of this realization of like, yeah, this isn't really fulfilling. We want something more human in our lives, and setting that intention to create that. So I think they'll find their way, but I think they're having some challenges right now.
Yeah. What do you say to parents that are, seeing their young men, and we'll say about that age, late teens,
Mm-hmm.
early 20s,
Mm-hmm.
because it's an
Mm-hmm.
age where, especially as mothers, we've been sort of told to back off and, let
Yeah.
them find their
Yeah.
way as a man.
Mm-hmm.
So what tips have you got for parents that when we see our young men maybe struggling with, different issues in life?
Yeah, and I think the mother and the father do have different roles, so that's important to say as well. Um, the mother, I feel, and there's always exceptions, but I'm just as a generalization. The mother is more of a source of unconditional love and nurturance and support, and I think the father's role is more um, has a role to sort of push especially if it's a son, if it's a father and a son, sort of kind of push him or challenge him a bit. And so we do that, my son and I. I forgot what was the initial question?
Oh, well, I'm just interested in, like, well, what can, if the dad's not around, like
Uh-huh.
single mums that have brought up their boys,
Yeah.
and see the same thing playing out. But we know that,
Mm-hmm.
there's only a certain role that mothers can play. We've got to let
Mm-hmm.
them go out and
Mm-hmm.
overcome their challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think ultimately we can't for me too. I can't make my son do anything. I can't, like there's lots of things that I've given him advice on in his life, and he's done the opposite of what I said, and then he learned. He said, "Oh yeah," and then he'll forget that I told him the other thing. He'll be like, yeah, guess what I realized?" I'm like, "I told you that like 2 years ago," that kind of thing. But but yeah, they have their journey. They have their journey, and we're just there. Hopefully, I would say the main thing is to have to really make space to have an intimate relationship with our children, that they can talk to us if they're struggling with something, or they're having a problem, or they don't know the answer to something, or they like advice, they know that they can talk to us, and that we're available for that. And then, sometimes they might need to have their own experiences and learn on their own. But if we have that close relationship, we can also give them advice that can save them from going down certain directions as well. And also realizing too that um, we're all works in progress, right? Like we don't have all the answers, and there's things that we can learn from our children sometimes as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, definitely a teacher-student interaction
Yeah,
on both parts. Yeah, I
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Brian, where does the heart come into all this from a man's point of view?
I think the heart is big. I think the heart is when we talk about the now, and being attuned into the moment and listening to the truth inside ourselves. Like for me, like literally, I'll often kind of listen right here. Ask a question and listen right here, and then I'll get the answer that's authentic. That comes from the deepest place inside myself. And so to live from the heart, that's the most essential thing, is to live from the heart.
So what's in a man, what's the healthy mind-heart balance?
The heart is primary. The heart is primary, and then the mind is like the subservient to the heart. Or like you think of the heart as like the horse, and the mind is the cart. The mind follows the heart.
Hmm,
uh yeah, I think the mind is important too, but the heart leads the way.
fascinating. I love that. Nice
And
one.
maybe we'll clarify too, like when I say heart, I don't mean just like superficial emotionality. It's something deeper. It's like a deeper knowing inside, or deep, it's like an intuitive, direct response that arises in the moment, which emotions help us to connect to it, the emotional guidance system. But it's not just emotion.
Is it that place that we spoke about earlier that we can access through the present moment, that
Yes,
God
yes,
source, universal
yes, yeah,
source that you spoke of, and
yeah,
the
yeah,
infinite wisdom and knowledge
yeah,
that we can connect to? So
yeah.
through meditation, you learn how to connect with that place. And once you've done a certain amount, you can just put your hand on your heart and call it in instantly. Is that,
Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
I would invite anybody, whether they've never meditated before at all, just to try that, just to really put your hand on your heart. And if you something that you don't know the answer to, put your hand on your heart, ask the question silently or out loud if you want, and then just really listen, for the answer, and just really feel like what's the first thing that comes through, and see what happens.
yeah. I learned that, I can't remember when, ages ago. And the reason, the way I learned to tell them apart from what an answer from the mind or the answer from the heart is, as you said, the answer from the heart or divine source comes through so quickly before your mind can formulate the words. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point, because the mind wants to analyze it. Let
Yes.
me analyze it. Let me see what the best way is, what's not the best way. Let me, logically, rationally, all that has its place. It's not to say that it's there. It's there. It has a function, but that's not the heart. The heart, the heart knows, instantly, like you said.
Telepathy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. All right, Brian, let's wrap up. First, I'd like to ask you to let people know where they can find you, and we'll drop all your links below in the description.
Okay, so the website is my name, brianpiergrossi.com. I have a few different social media accounts. I like Telegram a lot, so I have a group on there, so I can share the link with you for that. I have Instagram. I still have a Facebook, but I don't use it very much, but I'm still on there. And YouTube. I have a YouTube as well. But yeah, I'd say where the community is being built most right now is our Telegram group called Big Glow Unlimited. And um, yeah. those are the main things. If you go to the website too, there's a newsletter you can get on that. I'll keep in touch with people that way as well.
Oh, great. What sort of things do you have on your YouTube channel?
I did one recently, a video called How to Connect to God. 3 ways, the 3 steps actually. But I think it's a lot of what we talked about. I think we hit a lot of good points here. So it's kind of a deeper dive into a lot of these different areas that we've talked about. But the bottom line is just living a life that is inspired, living a life that it feels meaningful, living a life for those 4 principles that we talked about earlier: love, inner peace, inner freedom, empowerment, and feeling that as your anchor point, that you're living from, and knowing who you really are, realizing who you really are in the deepest spiritual realization, and expressing yourself in that place in the world moment by moment.
Yeah, so good. All right. I always like to ask the men to wrap up with a message for the men watching, maybe those that are suffering, struggling a bit at the moment. What will you say to those men?
I think the message to men is perseverance, persistence, accountability, commitment, and don't give up. Don't give up. That's my message.
Yeah, so good. Well, Brian, I've loved this conversation. All points that I totally, well, as a woman, lived a very similar path on my journey. So just love talking about it and hearing, the man's point of view and how this all entwines. And we always bring it back to the present moment, which I just loved. Oh, your books. Do you want to give your books a plug?
Yeah, the one is called The Big Low. The second one is called The Wow of the Now. And probably the easiest place at this point for people to find them is Amazon.com, or wherever your local bookstore can probably order them as well.
Okay, we'll drop the names of the books, the titles in the below as well. So thank you so much. An absolute pleasure. You're just a wealth of wisdom and lived experience and embodiment. So thank you very much, Brian, from my heart to yours.
Thank you so much, Gemma. I love your background, by the way.
It's great. Well, Hatha Judah, which is I talk about it in my intro. It's the sacred masculine site in central Australia. So that's why, and I always move my head to show that it's not Uluru, because many people, if I got my head there, they think it's Uluru. It looks very similar, but it's a totally different place. But they are quite close. They're like 40 miles apart. So yeah, that was
wonderful.
The energy that was the inspiration for this show. I'll just keep you on to get a title, if I may, Brian, and I'll say goodbye to our listeners, and I'll be back in a couple of days with another episode of Heart Warriors. Thank you. Bye.